Recording. Okay, so today I just want to do a quick video to help a friend out on Craigslist. And we're going to go over just some basics of setting up a JAMMA, and in this case a Capcom Play System 2, known as CPS2 in the hobby. What we have here, this whole cabinet is 25-inch dynamo, or excuse me, it's actually a 3KOM, 3KOAM Z-back. However, it's always a misnomer to call these dynamos. They share a lot in common with dynamo, but they're actually made by 3KOM. But you can watch that in another video. Today, let's cover first the question you had about JAMMA. This is what we call a JAMMA plug. It's an industry standard. You can think of it as a combination power, video, and controller. So like if you're comparing this to an Xbox, this would be like your power cord, your video cord, and your controller cord all in one. And it does, just like I said, it has the power connections are on it, the video connections are on it, the button connections are on it, as well as things like the coin doors, counters, and your test button, which on this happens to be right here. Your test button is kind of like your hidden options menu, and almost all games have it in some form or another. But this lets you set up things like you can see the high scores and erase them. You can set up the time and day. You can set up things like how many quarters per play. You know, some machines are set up where it's 50 cents or 75 cents for one play. You can also set the difficulty of the game. You know, sometimes the games, when you're playing them, it won't tell you what difficulty they're on. And if you're an operator, which is like the person that owns the arcade, or the person that owns them and puts them out in video store, in bowling alleys, or other places, like pizza places that might have arcades, and that's what we call the operator. So it's kind of like you can go in there and you can set the difficulty of the game so that people might end up putting more quarters in it than they would at another location. So, JAMMA, boy, I'm going to really have to test my memory here, but I believe it stands for Japanese Amusement Multimedia Adapter, or something like that. JAMMA. But, things to know about JAMMA. This one here happens to have a keyway, which keeps you from plugging it in upside down, but that is not always the case. And in some cases, they'll be labeled either written or with a sticker that says part side, and then the other side will say solder side. Now, if we take a look at this board here, this is actually Tekken 3. And this is its JAMMA Edge connector. We can see that it has a keyway. Let me turn it around here. It has the keyway, and it also says JAMMA. And when we're talking about part side and solder side, it refers to the actual motherboard, things like capacitors and chips. And you can see that they stand off the board, and that's the part side. And then the solder side generally doesn't have anything on it other than just solder and traces. And so that's how we identify part side and solder side. Okay? So, that pretty much covers what you need to know for JAMMA. Not all arcade cabinets, this is what we call a full arcade cabinet, not all of them will have this JAMMA connector in it. However, the next step, if you don't have a JAMMA cabinet, you can buy this harness it comes with the connector and all the wires, and you can convert it yourself to JAMMA, and the conversion costs maybe about $25 in parts. A lot of labor. You know, you have to be somewhat good with soldering and at least be able to use a pair of wire strippers and be able to crimp connectors on for the buttons. And we'll get to the buttons in a minute. So, now another question on there we had was a kick harness. What is a kick harness? Okay, so the JAMMA standard here only offers, there's a couple little variants to it, but the standard is that it only offers 3 buttons per character or per player. So games, a lot of the Street Fighters, Mortal Kombat's, a lot of your fighting games are going to need at least 4, but oftentimes they need 5 or 6. So that's what we call a kick harness. The kick harness offers that extra low, medium, and high kick for each player. And, you know, that adds 6 buttons total to the 6 buttons that are already on the JAMMA. Not every kick harness is going to be the same. We'll get to that in a minute when we talk about the CPS2. So that covers pretty much the kick harness. Now, let's go ahead and look at the CPS2. The CPS2 is what's going to be running a lot of your Street Fighter games. The more modern Street Fighter games, I should say. It also covers your Marvel vs. Capcom. It covers things like Darkstalkers, which is your extra Capcom characters like Heisenko or Lele.
Keep going.
And so this is the CPS2 main board. And you can think of this as like your Xbox. This doesn't have any games on it itself, but this is what has the processor and the graphics and everything to run the game. And it takes a remarkably big, pardon me, cartridge. Probably one of the largest cartridges in the industry. Now, some important things to know about these cartridges is the color speaks a lot for the cartridge. This is a blue cartridge, which means it's for USA. Green, I believe, is for Japan. And there's also a gray and black, and I think even an orange. But we're not covering those. The most important thing you need to know about this, if you're looking to build a system from scratch, is that your board, your game board, which is this is blue, needs to match your main board. So you can put a blue USA board in a blue USA bottom board, and they mate on just by like this. Oh, got backwards. Just like that. You push down at it. This is actually empty, and this is what I wanted to get to about. In my email, I said about the battery. These things have an internal battery in them, and when the battery dies, this game is completely garbage. It is no good. It's completely erased. That's why we call it CPS2 suicide. It will actually commit suicide when the battery runs out. So it has a limited lifetime. But there are some ways you can get or keep these things running and to get them back. And that's what I'm going to go over now. This is an actual game board which I've taken out of this blue box, and this is what we want to get to. This is your battery. And I remember I said it commits suicide. Well,
hold on. Okay, there it goes.
Oh, focusing. Yeah, focusing issues. So this is what we call, this is the battery, and this is what happens after time. This battery actually exploded, and you can see all the acid that's come down, and it's actually ruined this board. This board will never, ever live again. However, if your board is still working, and this battery hasn't been replaced, there is a method of replacing this battery. It only costs maybe $10 to $15, and you can add another 5 to 7 years of life to your board just by replacing the battery, and it'll ensure that it'll work. Now, the other way is if your battery is completely dead, but it hasn't exploded. It's just dead. You know, the board's okay, nothing's damaged. There's a couple of people that you can send these chips off, and he will rewrite the chips with what's a special version called a Phoenix Edition. A Phoenix Edition is where they've revived the chips with a special code. It is a modified version of the game. Some people believe that the modification is not as good as the original. I'll let you decide, but it is a way to revive your board, and with the cost and the shipping, you can probably do it for under $50. So that covers the CPS2 suicide. So basically, I'm going to give you a rundown of what is required to put a CPS2 system into an arcade machine that's JAMMA. So now on this, I actually have a modified control panel that has all the button locations. You can have your 6 buttons for one player, 6 buttons for player 2. If your arcade cabinet does not have enough buttonholes, you can drill them out, and the buttons are only about $1.50 to $2.50 each. They're dirt cheap. Joysticks, I've seen them as low as $10. $15 each would be about your average. So parts are very easy to get for them. Let's see. The CPS2 main board, they go for $60 to $100 on eBay. You know, your prices will vary. You would want to look for preferably a USA or Japan board, because those seem to have the most games available for them, and they'll run most of the games. It's kind of like having people talk about being able to play import games. Well, since we're here in the USA, you're probably going to want the USA version of the game. The Japan version is not that bad to have either, as most of the time in the game, most of the stuff is already in English anyway. Some games, I've been told, the import versions like Japan and Asia have more violence or more gore. You know, like it's similar to playing Mortal Kombat on, say, the Genesis or Super Nintendo. So, and this will plug into a JAMMA compatible cabinet. Now, again, if you don't have a JAMMA compatible cabinet, no real big deal, because you can convert the cabinet to work with JAMMA. Sometimes they'll have a plug similar to this, and you can buy just an adapter board. If they don't have this plug or something very strange, well, you can buy this whole thing for, you know, like $20 or say. Okay. The last thing to know is when choosing a cabinet to put these in is the monitor. This happens to be a 25-inch multi-sync monitor. You will not be having one of these screens unless you get something very new. And it's called multi-sync, but you can't think of it in the way of a computer's monitor's multi-sync. Arcades usually use 3 different modes of graphics. They have standard resolution, also known as CGA. They have medium resolution, known as EGA. And then they have high resolution, known as VGA. Now, there are a couple very modern games that will use Super VGA, but we're not going to cover that because they're too far and few in between. But for a CPS2, any standard resolution monitor will work. On some of the newer cabinets, you may run into monitors that have EGA or medium resolution. And some monitors, you can change the resolution using a wire, or there'll be a jumper that you move to select EGA and VGA. Some monitors will do it automatically, or in some cases the monitor will be EGA only, which means it will not accept any other input that is not EGA or VGA for that case too. There is a way around that, and what you need is called a video converter, and I don't have one available right at the moment, but they are very inexpensive. I think I paid maybe $30 for one. And those will let you take pretty much any kind of game system, whether it's CGA, EGA, or VGA, and it'll let you hook it into any monitor, CGA, EGA, or VGA. Some people argue as to the quality of the image, but I don't seem to mind it. It actually looks really good, and in the case of my Rush the Rock arcades over there, if you want to pan over there, the one on the right over there actually has a VGA monitor, and the one on the left has an EGA monitor. And everyone seems to go for the one that's VGA and running off of a converter because they think it looks better. So that pretty much covers the bulk of it. If you can find one of these 3Com Z-Backs, they are a great cabinet to do any kind of fighting game in. They usually feature 25-inch screens. They only have one speaker for mono, but you can add another speaker to these very quickly and very on the cheap. And I should also note that the CPS2, it has the ability to run in mono or single speaker, or in stereo with two speakers. That's that Q sound that you see when the game starts up. In the logo, there's that Q sound is registered trademark, blah blah blah, and it does the little kind of bells ringing chime thing. So to get stereo out of this, you'll need a little amplifier. And I just use this. You can find these all day long on eBay, $20 or so. It runs off a 12 volt, which you can get 12 volt right out of your power supply, or and they hook up using either RCA jacks or a headphone line, like you might come off of a cell phone or something like that. But these are really nice sound for $20. You really just can't beat it. So I hope that answered some of your questions about setting up a system that runs JAMMA or a system that runs CPS2. There's lots of games available for CPS2 still. It's just the important thing to know is that when you buy them, that they're working, and when you get them within the first week or so, you want to make sure you get that battery changed over, because you don't know when the last time the battery has been changed, or if it's even been changed at all. And some of these games for the CPS2, they start around $60, but they can go as high as $350. When I actually bought this system, as you can, I don't know if the camera will show it, but this is the actual Super Street Fighter 2 or Super Puzzle Fighter 2 sticker for the game. We really wanted this game, and this is what came inside of it, but of course the board had completely died. This game is running as much as $350 just for this cartridge. So, rare titles are going to be worth a lot of money, and they can be very hard to find. Since we've bought this in the last 6 months or so, I've only seen 2 of these come up for sale. One was the Japanese version, which is in the green case, which would mean I'd have to change to a Japanese bottom board. So, just something to be aware of. These boards, dime a dozen. The actual games for them can be hard to find. Now, you said you were interested in Marvel vs. Capcom. Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel superheroes. I think there's a Superman one. There's also Dark Stalkers, which is another good fighting game. That's where you find like Morgan and Lele, or what do they call her in Heisenko? But a lot of other Capcom, the off-brand Capcom characters you'll find in Dark Stalkers. So I hope that helps, and of course, if you have any more questions or whatever, feel free to email me, or even if you want to come see some of this stuff in person. One last thing that you might be interested in, especially if you're into Marvel vs. Capcom, this system here, if I pull it out, just take a minute here. This is what we call a Naomi. Now, I'm still in the process of getting all the components for this to